Welcome to Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelevitz. Today we're going to be talking about strength in intergenerational workforces. So what does intergenerational workforce mean in today's workplace? We have people of various ages that have been in the workplace either for a long time or just now entering it. And what we talk about a lot on this show is how those folks can interact, work together better, and how they can communicate in better ways. And we like to talk about how that strength in those workforces come from the fact that we have people in different experience levels and different ages. And as we've talked about in previous podcasts, it's important to understand that we are not our age. What we are is a collection of our experiences. So, what does intergenerational workforce mean to you? Is it how you interact with people older and younger than you? Is it the way you can hire somebody older than you or somebody younger than you? You know, a lot of times we communicate differently as our experiences come, but I have found that we have more commonality than we have differences. And we can respect traditional expertise while encouraging innovation from newer perspectives. And if you think about it, you can meld that beautifully in order to be more innovative and more productive. So we can respect tradition in your workplace while encouraging innovation. And it doesn't have to be an either or. So there was a study done by the World Economic Forum in 2023 called the Future of Jobs Report. It's a fairly long report, but the main point they found in there is that intergenerational collaboration is going to create more innovation. It improves team performance. And what they did is they walked through all the various things that happen between the ages and how we can bridge those ages. And if you get a chance to read it, there's some wonderful pieces in there about how the interaction works and how the interaction doesn't work. And the thing that they found that doesn't work is us staying in our conscious and unconscious biases. If those are more of an impediment than the part where we don't have a chance to communicate. So what they found is you need to meld, as I said, that tradition that's within your workplace, because every place has a culture, tradition, a way of doing things. But as we well know, is if it doesn't evolve, it dies. Businesses need to evolve, just like society does. But how do we harness that power? And one of the best ways to do that is through these intergenerational workforces. That's where the strength comes from. And what they found in this study is when you set up systems that allow you to communicate properly, to allow ideas from groups that won't necessarily be heard, that innovation takes off. So you really want to encourage innovation from a newer perspective. And that allows you to develop the intergenerational teams effectively. So to look back at that study, the World Economic Forum, they're really looking at what the future of jobs is going to be. And I think what happens a lot of times is we like to look back on how it was as opposed to how it can be moving forward. No business stays put where it is. We even do this in some of our hiring. We go, well, he did this in the past, so he'll probably be able to do this in the future, as opposed to looking at that problem solving. And what they found is in the future, the problem solving is really going to be important. And how do we enhance that? By better communication, encouraging innovation, getting new perspectives that work with ones that systems that have already worked, and encourage those developments of intergenerational teams to be more effective. So there's another study by the Journal of Applied Psychology. And they talk about leveraging age diversity for organizational performance and intellectual capital perspective. So that's a very long name and a very complicated name. But really what it comes down to is they used a very large sampling of almost 4,000 organizations. And they talked with the human resource management people. They talked with people working on the ground, and they found that how and what works in an age-diverse workforce. And the most important thing is that they found this kind of workforce that has people from various ages and experiences creates a lot of value. And, in subsequent casts, we will find, we're going to delve into more detail in some of these pieces, but some of the things to think about is how to set up your mentoring, how to set up what they call reverse mentoring, which is taking a younger person, mentoring somebody who's been in the workforce longer. But you have to be open to this. It's very important for this to work that you have to be open to that kind of change. It can't be, well, we always did it this way, because that's not going to carry you forward. And that also denies your less experienced or younger employees the chance to contribute. So it's up to you, if you're a manager or an owner, to make the ability and to give the opportunity for everybody to contribute. Because why would you hire them otherwise? You hired them to help you make a profit. How does that work? That isn't just sitting and allowing a few people to decide everything, because then you're losing your innovation. Yes, they have experience. That's extremely important. As I've said before, we can't substitute for experience. But what we have found is that through studies like this, is it really makes the business case for age diversity in your organization. And you really need to think about that, because you want to retain the folks who've been there a while, who have the institutional knowledge, but you need to meld that with the folks who are newer and can come in and see it from a different perspective. I often talk about thinking about the beginner's mind. So when you're teaching somebody something, you have to think about how it was when you first did it, not how you're doing it now with lots of experience. What opened your mind? What gave you a chance to learn? What gave you a chance to innovate? And you can harness that power that you're going to have from these folks who are coming in with excitement and with energy and all the things that will allow you to do that. So we really want to get to the point where we're focusing more on the merit of their contribution as opposed to who is actually saying it. We don't want to focus on just the age of the contributor. So what skills do managers need to develop if they want to have an intergenerational, have an effective intergenerational team? If you think about it, it's as simple as listening. Are you open to the ideas of somebody who has less experience? Are you open to listening to the folks who have more experience? Do you have the ability to meld those two experiences? That's a lot to ask. However, that's part of managing it. You're really connecting the dots. If you can connect the dots properly, you can harness the energy of both groups. So as a leader, what are some of the practical steps you can do to kind of shape that intergenerational culture? You really need to see how people communicate. You need to make sure you have a common language. Because a lot of times we're talking past each other and we're not listening. And I've talked about this before, this idea of active listening, where you really hear what the other person has to say as opposed to waiting to say your piece. Because we all want to do that. We want to contribute. But at the same time, you may have some people in your group who never speak up, and some who always speak up. And that's normal in any social or workplace or organization, that some are a lot louder than others. But you as a manager, as a leader, need to make sure you're hearing the voices of those who don't speak up. Because a lot of times they're taking the time to think it through. So you're melding your extroverts and your introverts who come at it very differently. And I think there's power in both. The extrovert's going to tell you right away, but the introvert can be intimidated by that. You have to create the climate where they can speak up. And you have to do that without embarrassment. You can't allow for somebody who doesn't speak up very often to be ridiculed or to have their stuff shot down all the time. And you may have to actually have a meeting, one-on-one and say, look, I like your ideas. I want you to bring them forward. How can I help you to speak up in the general audience? So just some advice for leaders to transform into this intergenerational challenge. You have to set up a common language. You need to find out how people communicate together. It's very important that you can have multiple channels, but you have to have a common one so we all know where to find each other. And different groups within your organization can talk in different ways. And every business develops its own language. And even departments within businesses develop their own language. But it's your job to make sure that you can bridge that. Because you're going to have language that's different for different ages. And you want to be the bridging of those ages. Very important. So think about, what skills you need. You may have to acquire some of them. And if you're like me, I always want to be learning. I'm just a lifelong learner. I want to keep learning more and more all the time. And understanding the value of everybody in your organization. And as we talked about, what's really important is that we have the opportunity to supercharge our innovation by having intergenerational teams. So think about what if you're not in a position of leadership and you aspire to be that, what advice would you give to the leader? Because as I said, I believe everybody has something to contribute. And I think people have a lot of value to give to the organization or the company, or even in a social situation, a volunteer. You all have something to contribute. At the same time, it's incumbent on all of us to be listening as well as speaking. And if you are a leader, think about the practical steps that you're going to take in order to make this happen. And think about the skills you might have to develop, what you have to learn about each of the people who are working for you. Because it's important to meld all that. And as I've said before, we are not our age. We are a collection of our experiences. And a younger person has much value, and an older person has much value, and everything in between. And as long as we understand and believe that that value is important, we as leaders and managers can meld it. As I said, we're the folks who connect the dots. And if you're not in that position yet, think about how your dot connects to other dots, because you can be part of the solution by doing that interaction, learning how people with different experience and age levels communicate, and being proactive about doing that. If you're older, learning what's important to your younger workers. If you're younger, learning what's important to your older workers, and how you can find that common language. I think what we will find is that we have much more in common than we do separately. And that commonality is our strength. So after a note from our sponsor, we'll talk about some action items and tips that can help you move forward with your intergenerational teams. Welcome back to Bridging of Ages. Let's talk about some action items that you can do in order to help find your way to building a culture of respect and empathy. First action item is you need to create multiple channels. What does that mean? How do you communicate? Do you know how you communicate? Do you know how your people communicate? We have a lot of ways to talk to each other in a business, in an organization. It could be a Slack channel. It could be a Teams channel. It could be text. It could be email. It could be actually talking to people face to face, and it can't even be phone calls. All of these are valuable in their own right, but they're all different. And people approach them differently. You may find that some of your older workers are more comfortable with email, but don't make the mistake thinking they don't know tech. Some of them even invented some of this tech. But they do know tech and they can figure it out. Think about some of your younger workers. They're not used to being on the phone or email as much. They like doing text-like and video systems like Slack and other messaging systems, and that works really well for them. Short videos, short text, a little different way of communicating, but you can still get it across. So allow different channels, but don't lose the communication in all the noise. So what's really important is you have to have a common channel. I've used different means of doing that. I've used Slack, I've used Teams, but I always designate a particular channel that we all have to subscribe to. I'm a big proponent of face-to-face and actually talking to people. Some people aren't comfortable with that. But as I said during my talk is you have to be able to adapt to the other persons as well as they adapting to you. You can't say, I don't communicate that way. That doesn't work in the workplace, and it breaks down the intergenerational dialogue, which is vitally important for your work, your innovation, and your success. So have a set channel that we all have to talk about and all have to use, while allowing variance for different projects, different ways of talking, and those kind of things. So if we have a common one where we can do the important things that everybody has to know, that doesn't stop you from having other channels. But it is vital to have that particular one that you all subscribe to. And you can, I always like to ask people how they best communicate. And they don't always get the one that they want, but I ask for a few that work for them. Because as I said, we're all at different levels and different ways of communicating. So we find ways to meld that. So create multiple channels while making sure that it's important to have that singular one that you all talk on. Action item 2. Model respectful behavior. Respect is really fundamental. Because if I'm respected, I am much more open to hearing other views and ways of doing it. I could have been very successful in the past, and I have been, in doing things a particular way. But that doesn't mean it's the only way. And if I talk to people and communicate with my team in a respectful manner, and they do the same, we're all going to be open to the possibility of success and collaboration. And I think there's a wonderful richness in intergenerational teams because you have such a varied amount of experience and energy and ideas that it far exceeds teams that are just within a very small band of ages. And it's something to think about when you're forming your teams. The third action item, recognizing different perspectives. We all have different past experiences that help formulate our ideas. And as I've said, we communicate differently. So we need to recognize those. That is wrapped in with the respect. That's wrapped in with the ways we communicate differently. But we really need to recognize those different perspectives. different perspectives can be melded and brought together to create a better whole. Because I know I don't have a monopoly on all the good ideas. I think I got some pretty darn good ones, and I'm sure the people I work with also do. But I always make it possible for my teams to have a different perspective, because you never know where the good idea is going to come from. I have been surprised so many times when the one person who maybe never speaks up comes up with something that is so innovative and so powerful and allows us to finish quicker and a lower budget, that it sometimes just blows my mind. And I've had somebody who just talks all the time, and there's still gems in there because they also have something powerful to say. But if you are respectful and you agree on the way you're going to talk to each other, you are able to recognize the different perspectives. So for the tip of today, it kind of puts all of this in together and in perspective. You really want to build that culture of respect and empathy. If we have empathy for the other people in our team and who we work with, if we have respect, we are going to build incredibly strong intergenerational teams. And we all have these conscious and unconscious biases that interfere. And when we're aware of them, we can listen. And as I said, it gets back to that active listening. That's part of respect. But empathy is also really important. I need to have empathy for the different experiences that you've had than I have. And that allows us to communicate in a much stronger way. So, to reiterate, action item number 1, create multiple channels. Action item number 2, model respective behavior. Action item number 3, recognize different perspectives. And that's all put together in the tip for today, which is build a culture of respect and empathy. Today's show was on building a culture of respect and empathy. Our next show is going to be, why would I hire my father or mother? And it really hits home in how a younger person reacts when they are in a position to bring somebody older onto their team. So I ask you to please subscribe to my YouTube channel. This is Dan Mendelevitz. We are Bridging of Ages, and we look forward to visiting with you again in our next show.